Dragon Ballers, real quick before we get into today's video, just want to share something with you guys that I am very excited about. PPG is going to be hosting the Pro Support TCG weekend in Dallas, Texas, the weekend of November 6th. It's going to be a giant TCG convention weekend hosting all your favorite games, obviously Dragon Ball Super, Digimon, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and more. Tournaments for all those. I'm actually going to be there commentating the Dragon Ball Super side of things, the main event on Saturday, the side events on Sunday. I absolutely cannot wait. And if you guys missed out on Gen Con or heard me talk about how much fun that was, you're 110% going to want to be at the Pro Support TCG weekend. The other great thing too is it's just 2 weeks before Nationals, the biggest Dragon Ball Super tournament of the year, so you can get some invaluable practice there. But besides that, it's a convention. It's going to be so much fun, especially for those of you guys like me that just absolutely love trading card games. Definitely check it out. The link to sign up will be in the description. I really hope to see you guys there. Now let's get into the video. Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. We just got the set 15 Saiyan Showdown ban list yesterday, so today we will be covering the winners and losers of that ban list. So we'll be talking about strategies that benefit pretty well off the cards that were touched on the list, as well as strategies that are negatively affected by it. Some are bigger winners and losers than others, and we will cover all that in today's video. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways to do so down in the description. But today, guys, if you're looking for custom sleeves, playmats, any TCG accessories like that, even foil playmats, use the link in the description to yourplaymat.com. It will get you 10% off your order. Their sleeves are out of this world, guys. I absolutely love their art sleeves. Best thing about them is they are art sleeves that don't peel, which is such a huge thing for art sleeves, and the fact that I don't have to double sleeve them, I absolutely love them. Again, 10% off your order. I know a lot of the players really love this stuff. Anyways, let's get into the video. Alright, so the first and probably biggest loser is obviously Icarus, one of the decks that I hold near and dear to my heart. The boy got hit pretty hard, and it makes sense because Gen Con, probably the biggest event of the format, of the most recent format. Icarus took up, I think, around about 60% of the field, and in many of the best of one tournaments he was still doing incredibly well, which, like, there is this kind of dynamic where best of one results generally are pretty different than best of three. Like, we see best of one like Cell Surge and Turning the Tide decks doing a lot better than they do in best of three, because in best of three you have answers you can bring out of the sideboard. But Icarus was doing incredibly well consistently across the board. It was easily the most played deck, so it makes sense that it was the main target of the ban list, even though the format felt pretty short-lived, and that's probably just mostly due to the fact that we didn't have too many events during the format. And again, I think the fact that a lot of them were best of one exacerbates the kind of shortness of it all. But still, I mean, Bojack definitely makes sense to me that it's banned. The card is obscenely powerful, basically a Xenoblade on legs. I have no gripes with that, but I do think that hitting both Violent Rush Bojack and Zamasu the Eliminator was just a step too far. And don't get me wrong, I think blue yellow is actually still a very good color combination, just because the cards in yellow are so powerful, and blue being the best splash color in the game, most likely, it's still a good deck, but it's obviously going to be several leagues down from where it was. So I definitely expect the deck to still see play, just obviously not on the same level that it was. And I also think that's going to happen because, like, what other yellow leader can really compare to what Icarus does? Like, let's say you take Icarus as blue-yellow, even with the nerfs, or you take Icarus as mono-yellow, let's just say. What other leader are you really going to play with mono-yellow good stuff? Like, Icarus has a crazy draw engine, pretty much self-contained, as long as you play 4 vanillas, which, like, a lot of times you might think, oh, I'm playing 4 vanillas in my deck, and that's just going to bog it down. But in this deck, they're not really even vanillas. They're actually super combos, which is kind of crazy. So, yeah, I think just comparing Icarus to every other yellow leader in the game, which leader are you going to play just generic yellow good stuff with? Like, maybe as a result of this, like, some yellow archetype decks are worth taking a look at. Like, maybe Yellow Turles kind of has my eye in set 15, and maybe some older yellow strategies possibly. But it is going to definitely be the thing, I think, where Icarus is going to be the best generic yellow leader deck. And yellow is one of those colors. I feel like colors in Dragon Ball Super have this sort of thing where some colors are definitely more archetype based. Like, I think red has some more archetypes, and I think green has more archetypes. But then, like, yellow and blue just seem to always be like good stuff in this color dot deck, which, don't get me wrong, I definitely enjoy playing. But yeah, I just don't see Icarus being outclassed by any other yellow leader as far as just generic yellow good stuff goes, which I don't think is a bad thing. I'm just saying my thoughts on it. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. These other yellow decks can definitely have their archetypes and maybe some other things going for them, but I think Icarus will still be good, but obviously very, very big loser from the ban list. Then we have Soul Striker and SS4 Vegeta. So both these leaders are taking a hit in the form of Galactic Buster. Galactic Buster was errated to only be playable in Bojack leaders, so those are definitely mainstay engines in both of these decks. And just speaking for Soul Striker, because blue-yellow Soul Striker was also a relatively popular build, they are also going to feel the negative effects of the Zamasu the Eliminator nerf, because that was the main reason you were playing blue-yellow. It wasn't for Bojack. Like, many blue-yellow Soul Striker lists didn't even play Bojack, because with a blue leader, you get so much excess energy anyway that Bojack was super non-essential. But the fact now that Zamasu can't hit in unisons, I think Soul Striker and pretty much most blue decks with blue leaders are going to be going back to mono blue. I don't see much of a reason for them to tech yellow now that Zamasu the Eliminator doesn't really hit in unisons anymore. But as far as SS4 Vegeta goes, yes, it is technically a loser because it lost a really powerful package that it had. But Android 17 Turning the Tide somehow dodged the ban list, and SS4 Vegeta is still the deck that can probably get it out the fastest, most consistently. So that's still a pretty solid thing SS4 Vegeta has going for it, especially in best of 1. Best of 3, maybe not so much, because without the Bojack Brigade engine, the deck definitely did lose a lot of its flexibility and a lot of its ways to end the game, because just putting out those Bojacks, whether it's the Evildoer or the Big Bojack, like, those are really big threatening cards that remove battle cards and put a lot of pressure on for very cheap. So if, let's just say, you're afraid of game 2 and 3, your opponent bringing in Jiren Survival of the Fittest, which you should be afraid of, you've lost a way to create pressure outside of Tide. So your game 2s and 3s definitely got worse than they already were, but I do think SS4 Vegeta is going to be pretty solid in best of 1 still, because I think you can pretty much just swap out the Bojack Brigade stuff for cards like Gohan Baby's Minion, maybe Vegeta Ready to Rumble, cards like that. I think those are going to be pretty solid replacements in terms of just the Bojack Brigade stuff. Like, you're going to have to play the deck differently, because the Bojack Brigade stuff lets you do things in the combo step and remove battle cards, whereas these cards I'm mentioning don't quite let you do that, but they do let you stall to your boss monster, which is what a deck like this probably wants to do, right? Where you're trying to go for an Android 17 Turning the Tide win condition backed up by maybe a Boo Unison. That can be a pretty solid replacement SS4 Vegeta. Soul Striker, though, again, I think it's going to go mostly mono blue. I don't really see any more reason to play blue yellow. Zamasu getting hit just pretty much axes that deck. But I do think blue Soul Striker will probably still be okay. I think there are other engines you can play that can replace the Bojack engine, and they might not be necessarily quite as good, but I do think it's still going to be playable. Then we have a weird one, because these Bojack leaders are actually both winners and losers of the ban list. So the reason that they're losers is because Violent Rush Bojack was banned instead of getting the treatment of the errata where it would just be only for Bojack leaders. That would have been really nice, because I've mentioned it many times already, but basically you take a really powerful card like Violent Rush Bojack and you lock it to a much weaker archetype, and then you find some semblance of balance, right? Because you have one very powerful card with an entirely weaker archetype than their blue and yellow counterparts. So that would have been a good thing to do, but they didn't do that. But on the flip side, both these leaders now have exclusive access to the Galactic Buster engine. So that's a pretty good thing they have going for them, but I don't think it's going to be enough to propel them to the top of the metagame or anything. Like, it might be a reason you want to look at either of these leaders. I think that is a pretty cool thing. And I think both these leaders have, like, their formats where they can be decent. Like blue Bojack, for example, I think can be solid if an aggro deck ever becomes really good again, which I'm sure will happen in the future, not anytime super soon, but I'm sure that will happen. So I think blue Bojack will be worth exploring then. And then yellow Bojack, you have to look for an opportunity in a format where the 8-drop boss monster can maybe do some serious damage, and I think you have a good reason to take a look at both of these different leaders. But yeah, these guys are kind of in limbo, but they make the perfect transitionary kind of page to start talking about the winners now. Biggest winner might just be Cell Surge. Like, a lot of people wanted hits to this deck. I was one of those people, but to be fair, the deck didn't quite put up the results to probably warrant a hit. But I think this is a case of, like, the players knowing this deck is a bit scarier than it leads on, and that's a pretty weird phenomenon. You would expect that if a deck was so scary that many people kind of have a problem with it, you'd expect to be terrorizing a format. But of course, like, Cell Surge is not without bad matchups, right? We're going to talk about that in just a second, but it's still a deck that can auto beat a lot of decks, and that's one of the things that I think the player base has never really been a fan of, is auto wins and losses. Like, out of all the different posts and forums I recall from many of the previous formats, as well as my own feelings on them as well, I've always really disliked when there have been auto wins and auto losses. Yes, of course, there should be favorable and unfavorable matchups, but that's a big difference than auto win and auto loss. Like, if you take Cell Surge up against an SS4 Vegeta, it feels pretty much auto loss, especially considering the fact that you actually just pretty much are not allowed to play Dabur Ritual at hand or Sand Instincts in your deck. Even against Soul Striker, it's not quite as auto loss, but it's still like a very negative matchup, which can feel pretty bad. And it's just the problem of Cell Surge being super uninteractive. Like, even the most hardcore control decks should have a pretty decent realm of interactivity, whether you can interact with their boss monsters, or you can be kind of aggressive with them in the early game, which right now aggro is just in a really weak state, so that's not super possible, at least from the known quantity decks, right? But that's kind of what we're looking at. But the other winners could very well possibly be the aggro decks. If Cell Surge is going to take a big step up, maybe aggro can find a good place as a counter. Just from my knowledge of playing Cell Surge at Gen Con, Gogeta Xeno, it's a tough matchup. It's really tough because they can put a lot of pressure onto you early, so they get to do that before you really get into your hand-ripping engine. Now, this is definitely not an auto loss for Cell Surge, just speaking back on the auto loss, auto win thing, but I do think it's a bit of an uphill battle for Cell Surge. But again, just because of that weakened state that aggro's in, I think it's going to be a little bit tough. But even maybe a deck like Starter Vegeta can actually make a comeback, both because it can be very aggressive, and that might help against Cell Surge, but also because Monster Eliminator got hit, and this deck requires a Unison to awaken on turn 2, and that's no longer a fear for a deck like this, so that can be pretty solid. So that pretty much covers my thoughts on the winners and losers. But honestly, guys, quite possibly one of the biggest losers of this ban list, and it might not be a direct result of this ban list, but that might just straight up be set 15 Saiyan Showdown, because so many of the archetypes look very weak in comparison to what we have in the current metagame, and that's okay. I think it's okay for a set once in a while to be a dud, but I think at this point we're looking at like 2.5 sets that have not really introduced all that much into the metagame, and that's just because older stuff is very powerful. And I think the ban list did a decent job. Like, I talked about blue and blue yellow being taken down in power but not being unplayable. I think they're still decent, and it also seems like decks like this might rise up in power a bit if Cell Surge does better. I don't think anyone really loves the fact that Cell Surge is going to be rising in power potentially, but it's just also a combination of the fact that the stuff in set 15 doesn't really seem all that great, and that was also pretty much the case with set 14. But anyways, those are my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.